So good morning, everyone. Yes, we have a very interesting panel today. I think this is the first panel I've been on in blockchain regulation where there is more women than men, and that includes our dog. And we did lose David to go and have a baby, so it's the first panel I've actually been on where somebody went into labour. So it's a good start. So our panel topic is token regulations, perspectives from Europe and the US. And I've added one in beyond because we have the Honourable Minister Caines from Bermuda. My name is Loretta Joseph. I'm the Australian Digital Chamber of Commerce Advisory Chair. I'm also the FinTech and Regulation Advisor to the Bermudian Government. I'm the FinTech and Regulation Advisor to the Mauritian Government. I'm the Blockchain Advisor to the OECD. And in 2016, I was the Australian FinTech Leader of the Year. And last year, I managed just to be the Australian FinTech Leader of the Year. So I think equality-wise, we're getting there. I've got a fabulous panel here. Who'll introduce themselves in a minute. I have Olga, I have Chris, I have Eva, and as I said, we lost our other two members, but we'll try and make it an interesting conversation for you. So Olga she's the CEO of Valor. Chris is a member of the House of Lords. He's also a blockchain advocate, and he wrote the Blockchain Week, Make It Last. And we have Minister Caines, who's the Minister of National Security in Bermuda. He's also the Minister of Blockchain, so we call him the Blockchain Minister for short. And we have Eva, who's a member of the European Parliament. So this is a really interesting topic, token regulation. There's been a lot of jurisdictional arbitrage, I guess, since this sort of came into to being a few years ago. Jurisdictions are trying to carve out, where they see regulation around blockchain and specifically tokens. So to date, in the blockchain space, I think we've seen blockchain's killer app as the ICOs. Does everyone know what an ICO is? Okay, yeah. So I think to date we've had $8 billion raised. So it was probably something that was going to be ignored a few years ago. I got into the space in 2012. I helped the Australian Digital Chamber of Commerce write the first regulation around Bitcoin. In 2014, had some Bitcoin and some Ether. I wanted to go and put in my tax return, so I figured there was a problem. So there was a double GST on it. So I worked very hard in Australia, and I had the GST taken off it. And last year, we actually had all the digital asset exchanges put under the anti-money laundering, anti-terrorism task force in Australia called AUSTRAC. So this new form of early-stage financing has been really promising. At least it looks like that in theory. Some have called it dumb money, as tokens can enable platform participation and allow post-ICO startups to bootstrap network effects. Even better, the ICOs have promised decentralisation from a technical perspective, and there are no formal barriers to the ICO fundraising. From a practical perspective, however, ICOs are much, much more complicated. The barriers to legal fundraising have been very high. This US Securities Commission, the SEC, have been very outspoken recently about their ICOs. We don't have David, so we'll all have to add in. And they've been dramatically under-regulated, according to many of the regulators. That's a nice way to say that many of the founders and investors have been unwittingly breaking securities laws. So within the public ICO market cooling in 2018, we saw a few people a bit more hesitant to get in, but we also saw a lot of scams. Much more money, though, continues to pump into this new ecosystem, mainly in the private pre-sale offerings. It's a good time to speak about things that the world has been ostensibly designed to draw in and control exuberance. Structures like government regulation and best practices are what we're going to talk about today. So our panel is going to look at the two big grey areas that surround the persons who develop these things and then sell them like a token, whether it's an app coin, a currency, a crypto asset, whether governments will call it a virtual currency, or whether it will actually be a mechanism for sharing profits that arise from common enterprise. So as I said, we've got an outstanding panel. I'm going to let them all introduce themselves now, and then we'll get cracking. Who wants to start? Chris? We'll start at the other end.
Thank you. I'm Chris Holmes. I'm a member of the House of Lords. This is Lottie. I thought everybody was bringing their dog. You've got to love golden Labradors, haven't you?
Yeah.
What's funny about that? And I've been in Parliament since 2013, and my main areas are everything around the fourth industrial revolution, obviously blockchain, blockchain. That doesn't come into it at all. Blockchain does, though. Blockchain and distributed ledger technologies are a key part of that. And what I wanted to do was broaden the debate, level of interest, and through that level of understanding and capacity in the UK around this subject, not just limited to the currency area and the tokenization, which obviously we're going to be looking at today, but taking it into the whole sense of public good as well. So I wrote a report last autumn, Distributed Ledger Technologies for Public Good, Leadership, Innovation, Collaboration. And though I specifically ruled out the ICOs and stuff from that report, I think many of the things and the recommendations that we came up with there are very pertinent and germane to what we're discussing here. And blockchain is only one element of 4IR, but all of the rules, principles, and essentials that we have to apply across 4IR, I think, apply to blockchain. And that is, I think, we should be rationally optimistic about the opportunity. We need to do a lot of collaboration, a lot of communication, a lot of connection around this area. Otherwise, the opportunity, which is great, will be lost, and you'll see other jurisdictions around the world, as we'll learn today, take advantage. That's all a great thing, because ultimately there's a phenomenal opportunity for the world from this. I know we're going to get into a lot of the details around the issue specifically here with ICOs, etc. But I think the fundamental point for me is whichever element of this you look at, there's an extraordinary opportunity without being Panglossian about the risks and mitigations and what we need to do around legislation and regulation. We need to just be really clear there is an extraordinary opportunity if we all get after it, seize it, and ensure that politicians, parliamentarians and legislators are fully seized of that opportunity.
So thanks, Chris. Yeah, as we go through this panel, I'm going to bring all these jurisdictions together so you can see how the puzzle is developing and being solved. Olga?
So my name is Olga Feldmeier. As you hear, Olga is very Russian. Feldmeier is somewhere Switzerland, Germany, right? So I'm going to talk about Switzerland. Since I lived there for 5 years, was a banker, then turned into Bitcoin back in 2015, was working with FINMA, Swiss financial regulator, on getting the US company, Bitcoin wallet provider, getting a license in Switzerland. Been there, done that. We made a great success. You know, we were one of the first Bitcoin cases that got a green light from Swiss financial regulator. And today I'm CEO of a company called Smart Valor. It's a marketplace for tokenized alternative investments. So basically kind of like exchange for asset-backed tokens and for security tokens. And that's why you can imagine, guys, regulation is one of our key topics, right? How to make it work. If your token is not a utility token, but it's actually a share, how can we create a marketplace which is global and enables the same advantages of ICO while being legal and compliant? So we'll talk about it later.
Well, thanks, Olga. So this is Minister Caines up next. We also call him in Bermuda Hurricane. I've been in Bermuda since Davos, and I think Bermuda, I think startups were fast, but I think Bermuda's the first country in the world that's actually faster than any startup I've ever seen.
Good morning, everyone. Is my mic on? Good morning, everyone. So we had an election in Bermuda last August, and our government came into power. Our premier, or our leader, is 38 years old, and he's a technologist. And so immediately after our government gained power after the election, we wanted to do something, and we looked at how do we move our country forward? How do we change the world? How do we look at what's going on around our planet and make Bermuda the epicenter of this industry? And so we came upon changing the world through fintech, and we just started to focus on blockchain. We went to the World Economic Forum in Davos, and we met some really cool people like Muirhead, and we immediately came back home and we realized that there were significant opportunities here. With our global partners, we have managed in the last 3 months to pass ICO legislation that govern how money is raised, what you do with the money just in the ICO space, and we've recently had the second reading of the Digital Asset Business Act, and that governs digital assets, which some people call cryptocurrencies, are wallets, exchanges, and things of that nature. We have seen a gigantic shift in the world with reference to looking at Bermuda as setting standards. And what did we do in Bermuda that we believe is different? We have set what we believe is called the Bermuda Standard. That is a standard for AML, anti-money laundering, KYC, know your customer, or ATF, anti-terrorism, or CTF, counter-terrorism financing. And so we've put enshrined in law what you need to set up a company and launch an ICO out of Bermuda, or if you're establishing an exchange or a digital asset, and if you want to use Bermuda. Over the last few months, things, to coin a phrase, have gone bananas. Companies from all over the world have started coming to Bermuda looking to set up their entities in Bermuda. And we believe this is not just a testament to what we've done to be one of the first countries in the world to set up legislation. We believe it's the whole trifecta. Bermuda is known for being a financial center of reinsurance and for financial services. And so for the last 60 years, people have set up their reinsurance companies, their financial services company in Bermuda because of our reputation around solid, responsible finances. And so we've leveraged that opportunity in Bermuda to create what we believe is a very strong legislative framework to attract the best companies to come to Bermuda to set up their ICOs and to set up their exchanges. And so we believe that our gift to the world, Bermuda's gift to the world, we're 22 square miles with pink sand and turquoise water in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. That alone should want to make you come to Bermuda.
I love that. I love that.
But the icing on the cake is we have looked at Bermuda being a center for innovation. And so when people just talk about cryptocurrencies and coming to Bermuda, we actually see that as a part of it. We see setting up incubators. We have a number of companies setting up their incubators or startups coming to Bermuda. And we see ourselves almost of the Silicon Valley of the Atlantic. And so with very sound regulation, with a very, very progressive, sound, competent government, and with people like yourselves coming from all over the world, we believe is an excellent opportunity for companies to set up their ICOs and digital asset exchanges or token offerings and run those through Bermuda.
Thanks, Wayne. It's a personal privilege of mine to sit with you, Eva, here. She's one of the original block stars that we have in the world, and
I wouldn't say that. So basically now I want to go to Bermuda. This is what I'm thinking, the pink sand, but that would be a great opportunity, and congratulations for doing that. It needs you to be bold about it, because I'm working in the European Union trying to initiate more legislation. So we realized that coming from Greece, that the crisis that hit us needed a solution. So when I realized what blockchain can do, and of course the decentralization giving you control and releasing you from the control of central banks in cases like that, of course, in extreme cases like that, this could be basically an amazing technology. So I forced a bit for legal certainty, because we saw the volatility of the prices and the hype that could also kill a market, because a lot of scams take place. It needs some clarity there, because the momentum is also essential and people are investing there, and this can create even bigger potential very soon. I understood that legal certainty is connected to volatility. So if you have more legal certainty, you have less volatility of the prices. So we have a very supportive approach. We passed a resolution, I think, like 10 days ago. The amazing thing is all the parties voted for that, which was great. Some friends are saying that if somebody disagrees with the technology, it's like they don't understand it. If you understand it, you definitely support the technology. So what we do is follow some principles. We are technology and business neutral and innovation friendly. So we achieved that. We are giving financing and funding for blockchain technology to be implemented as an infrastructure to several projects, like supply chain, for energy, for health, identity, of course. And now I called for an observatory for ICOs and tokens. We need some clarity there, because I agree it's an amazing tool to raise money instead of crowdfunding, that in Europe especially you have the national barriers, so it's not working well. But at the same time, we need to make sure that there are common definitions and understanding and some, again, legal certainty Since there are very successful scams out there, even now, that raise a lot of money and they don't make sense. So we have to make sure that people know the jurisdiction, they know who the team is, they know if there is a product or not, they have transparency, and of course they know what to expect. So this is the work we're going to do the next year. We have several legislative files coming, and this means we try to have a harmonized environment in Europe, hopefully UK. We'll follow that, and we will be together in this effort. But at the same time, we work and we try to find out best practices around the world and implement basically some legislation that will not be different than anything else. It will be supportive, and because this is basically technology that has no borders, like no barriers. So we have to make sure that we facilitate it to take place and change the world, and just protect investors, citizens, but also the developers themselves.
Yeah, it's been interesting because I started doing this in Australia, as I said, in 2012, and I was very lucky because I had one regulator who was very supportive of this, Greg Metcalf, who was also the head of IOSCO. I had one government and a very mature market. So, but the problem for me was rolling out law in a country that is quite large, and legacy laws are very often hard to change. So that's why I think some of the I'm actually a fan of blockchaining at tropical islands, in case you haven't noticed. But I believe that the smaller, nimble countries can be more innovative because they can jump through the hoops that we have around regulators and multiple numbers of them. In Europe, there's a lot of regulators. In the US, it's ridiculous. It's like a big jar of spaghetti. So it's very, very hard to change things. Some jurisdictions are moving quicker than others. As I said, you're seeing this in the emerging world because they can actually leapfrog. So somewhere like Bermuda, that's 21 kilometres. And I think, Minister, if we're right, we've had $30 million pledged to the jurisdiction in the last month by the ecosystem, because the ecosystem has been trying to find a home. And the standardisation and harmonisation of regulations, to me, is my dream. I think what I've also done is Commonwealth countries, because I think if we've got 52 countries around the world that all have the same law, and we can move companies between jurisdictions, the world's going to be a better place if the internet's taught us anything. So on that, what's been happening in your jurisdiction, Chris?
So in the UK, I think we have a real opportunity because of our culture, common law, the ecosystem, not just around London, but in other fintech hubs around the country, not least Leeds, Edinburgh, for example. And as you may know, there's the task force, which was set underway by the Bank of England and the Treasury, and certainly the Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, and the Chancellor, Philip Hammond, have been positive around this area, hence why the task force was established, due to report in the summer. Who knows how bold those report findings and recommendations will be, but I think there's the next opportunity for all of us when the task force does report to really pile into that space, because it will be another important milestone and moment in time for us to make the case, really. I think that's what really counts here. It's the reason why I did my report on blockchain in a broader context, to build on what our then Chief Scientist, Sir Mark Walporter, did in his report in January 2016. And his report was a great piece of work, but unfortunately it lost some of the momentum because we suddenly decided that every late spring in 2015, 16, 17, it would be a good idea in this country to have some kind of election or referendum. When I say good idea, it's clearly using that term very, very broadly. That's why I did the report, to increase momentum on this area. I think that, as I say, the next big opportunity will be when the task force comes to report in the summer. But again, it's that sense of the tremendous opportunity we have in the United Kingdom. But it doesn't matter how big an opportunity is, it won't just happen as a matter of chance or inevitability. It will only happen because many, many people get behind it and push for what we need to happen. We've got, in this area, I think we've got a pretty good regulator with the FCA, you see what they've done in the broader fintech space. So there's many, many reasons to be cheerful, but nothing will happen in terms of realising that opportunity unless everybody gets behind it and plays their part.
So Olga, obviously Switzerland has been the jurisdiction in the last few years that's been at the forefront of championing this ecosystem. What do you see as the good and the bad in Switzerland?
Good and the bad. Well, you see, you guys, I don't know how many of you were to Switzerland. Anybody? Ever? Like, what's so great in Switzerland? and? Yeah, exactly. So here we go.
Giacometti sculptures.
But who of you guys know that actually Switzerland is, in this banking center index, it's the 5th largest banking center. Well, a very special one, specialized on wealth management, right? But actually banks are very important. Financial services industry is very important for this country, right? And you know, the status of the country, right? Neutral, was never involved in wars, right? Like the safety and custody of this world. It's a very special place, right? Plus, add to this that regulatory approach is very different. How this is different? We're speaking about principle-based, technology-neutral regulation, right? So what does it mean? That there are not, such a detailed rules and a lot of like legal, paragraphs about how and which business models should be regulated, but it's principle-based. And it's, on case-by-case basis. So basically, it's very open to any kind of new innovation. So that's base, right? So this is actually, I think, great. Because this openness and this neutral approach, whenever something new comes in, there is a breathing space and there is a space to define how to deal with it, right? Now, concretely, what happened in Switzerland? So there were a couple of very famous cases, like this one where I was involved, Xapo, Bitcoin custodian, Bitcoin wallet, came to Switzerland from US. We went to England. I was here talking to FCA, I guess, right? So back then, 2015, honestly, guys, this was like closed door, right? Don't even touch, right? Just walk away. So, and we also spoke to folks in Singapore and in Hong Kong and in Liechtenstein and in Luxembourg, right? So basically, Switzerland was quite open to engaging in conversation how we should, regulate this Bitcoin wallet, right? And we achieved success. So in several cases like this Bitcoin wallet came around, where financial regulator gave the signal, we want to have you here, come, we discuss, we can sit together, we can discuss, this is a law and this is your business model, and there is a gap. How do we deal with that, right? So this kind of dialogue, I think this is only possible in a quite small country like, Switzerland and maybe with my neighbor here. Yes, so this is actually great. This is what you want. If you're a small company and you have very innovative business model in fintech, for example, it doesn't fit in any of the boxes, this is a great place to be. And on ICO side, what happened is basically that last year, as probably most of you know, Switzerland became one of the top 3 countries through which ICO funds were raised, right? So we saw founding of 400 companies in Crypto Valley. 1 billion was raised just last year through Swiss entities. And it's like the first biggest country is US and UK, and then the third one is Switzerland, so top 3. And why? Because, in Switzerland, if you issue a share, if you, offer participation in your company, even if it's security, it's not that bad, right? You need to do certain things, you need to issue prospectus and so on, but it's kind of like, it's not that, I would say, cumbersome and expensive as to do the same in US, right? So that's one of the reasons, of course, all of you know Ethereum was one of the first largest, not largest, but first ICOs in that space. Back in 2014, Ethereum, Vitalik Buterin, they came to Zug, where we now based, rented the house, ran their ICO through foundation. And after that, a lot of people looked into that, right? And maybe the last piece of information, in February this year, FINMA, this was a financial regulator, issued so-called ICO guidelines, defining, giving a legal framework or orientation for ICOs. They said, okay, so there are 3 types of tokens: payment token, like Bitcoin and Ethereum, utility token, basically access to services or a platform, access right, and the third one is asset token, security token. And they also defined in this document what are kind of implications of each type of token, right? They said, for example, that if it's payment token, right, like most protocol tokens, then you need to apply the AML and KYC rules, because it's kind of like money, right? You don't want other people to launder dirty money through your company, right? And this is right. I think this is excellent. Of course, it's cumbersome. Of course, yeah, you need to ask people to send a passport copy and to do video onboarding in certain cases. Of course, for ICO companies, like many people say, that sucks, like now I need to get all this all this procedure in place. But, for me personally, I used to work at UBS in wealth management. I think this is great, because there are some people and some, operations that use this innovation and use this blockchain for money laundering purposes, and that should be stopped. So this is great. And those ICO guidelines, they overall outline, how you can do it, but they also say, the FINMA head explicitly said that we would like to attract legitimate innovators to Switzerland to run their projects and fundraising in a legal and compliant way. So the message is, we want to attract you guys. That's very opposite to US, right? And recently, the last point, Geneva, that's canton, we have a lot of cantons in Switzerland. So Geneva issued also ICO guidelines welcoming ICO companies to Switzerland. So that's a very different tune, right?
But I think that's interesting, just on some of those comments. Like, my experience in Bermuda was, I think it was the first time that ICO regulation was written by policymakers who tend not to be technologists. And a lot of the jurisdictions, you've seen these guidelines and policies come out. You've had technologists write policy. Now, those worlds don't meet very often, especially in this ecosystem. So we were really collaborative. We actually sat down with the government, the regulator, and the policy writers for 2 months and penned what I think is the best regulation, ICOs around if they're a security, they're a hybrid of a security, or maybe they're a utility. But on that, it was Minister Caines, in light of the recent developments and the law you've changed, one of the biggest considerations, I guess, was the KYC AML and how the jurisdiction would be viewed by the rest of the world. And so what's your view on how we approach the KYC AML, and how do we get companies to, why do we get such interest from all these companies?
It's interesting, the Swiss perspective as opposed to the Bermuda perspective. The Swiss perspective, as I just recently understand, it is to set out guidelines, not to be as heavily handed with regulations and with law. I think what Bermuda is realizing, has realized from our financial experience, is that people need regulatory certainty. That when somebody is looking in the ICO space, they want clear guidelines that are enshrined in law. If there are any breaches, you can hold the bad actors to account. And so when you're in a space that is evolving, when you have people from all over the world that do not understand the technology or the methodology in raising money, we believe it's important to set a healthy environment with clear laws and guidelines that can be viewed by anyone, and that there's a standard of accountability. And I think especially when you're in the ICO and in the space that we are, Bermuda's recently, Binance has recently come to Bermuda. And Binance has indicated that they want to run their compliance center in Bermuda, and that they want to do ICO raises, or that they want to do, they want to set up they're an exchange in Bermuda. Overstock.com, their parent company, has come to Bermuda. And when you look at all of the companies in the last month that are coming to Bermuda, I see Stan Locker that's here from his company, Hub Culture, set up one of the first innovation labs in Bermuda. The reason why Stan and his company, they will set up in Bermuda is because they were looking for a safe jurisdiction. They were looking at a jurisdiction that showed that they did their sums, that they looked at this thing from a specific and a strategic standpoint. More importantly, that there is an accountability piece. When you talk to organizations like the OECD and other global regulatory bodies, they like the accountability piece. They want a country that is secure. They want to be able to look at the legislation, and they want to be able to, every step, to be able to see each element of it that is enshrined by law. Bermuda is a British dependent territory, and so we are governed by our highest court in our country is the Privy Council in the United Kingdom. And so people have the jurisdiction certainty that when they are coming to a country like Bermuda, that it has international best practices, that their business is protected by law. The law sets out for the ICO raise. What do you have in the white paper? What is the money being raised for? In our Digital Currency Act, it sets up what, there is a clause in there that companies have to be domiciled in Bermuda, and that they have to have a key man in Bermuda. It sets up what does the exchange look like, and what does the token offerings look like. What is the difference between a security and a utility token? There is a hybrid of the same. And so Bermuda's looked at this from a regulatory standpoint. Again, it is not taken in abstract. We have done reinsurance and financial services all over the world. As a matter of fact, a number of the companies that are in Zug are companies that originated in Bermuda. So I believe that there is not necessarily a good way or a bad way. I look at the Swiss model and I see benefits in doing that as well. I think Bermuda is saying that, listen, we're going to set the Bermuda standard. If you want to come to Bermuda, you have to be the best in this space. That you have to open up your books. You have to do things properly. There is an accountability piece. And so you might not meet the Bermuda standards from an AML, KYC perspective. Then guess what? Bermuda is not the right jurisdiction for you. We only want the creme de la creme setting up their companies in Bermuda so we can keep and have the world looking at Bermuda and say, you know what? We want to model our ICO or our digital asset exchange. We want to model it after Bermuda.
This is super helpful, because it has certain spillover effect, right? Those guys around us do it. Regulators, they look into each other, right? You guys look what's across the border, right? Yeah. And the more you do, the more we can incorporate and learn from you, right?
Sure. Yeah. I think something that you said that we have to piggyback on. Sometimes I'm a lawyer, and so sometimes in other spaces, people are very myopic, and they're so focused on what they're doing in their country. Bermuda has had the benefit of getting the best minds from all over the world. So if they're doing something in Malta, if they're doing something in other countries, we're able to be, and that is what's so cool about the blockchain space. It is very collaborative, and we've been able to take the best minds from all over the planet and put our legislation together. And that's why I think when somebody looks at the Bermuda Digital Asset Business Act, you're not going to see a Bermuda perspective. You're going to see a global perspective. Why? Because we've taken all the minds from around the planet and we've put it together to make this legislation.
That's very cool. I'm pecking.
Yeah.
So Eva, I think the European Union's got a huge part to play in cultivating this technology. Europe is, it covers many countries, many jurisdictions. How do you see the legislation and the regulation then developing at a UE level versus a national level in the European Union?
Let me say that when I talk about blockchain, I don't mean just the ICOs. The ICOs for me is a tool to support the technology that actually exists. So it's an exciting technology that can help you get rewarded on your wallet in an automated way if you offer a service or a product. But mainly we finance and we fund actual projects. So we try now, as I said, to have the observatory for 1 year at least or 2 years ahead, that will monitor all the best practices used about categorizing the tokens and the ICOs and make sure that there will be legal certainty and clarity. But it exists in each member state a different approach, and we will try to harmonize that. The thing is that we already have some laws apply in any case, and we try now to find new definitions, so we don't care about just fitting everything in all boxes. We are open into new definitions, so we don't have to have securities or utilities, we might have a different approach in several cases that you can reward people. Or if there are some white papers that they say, so you have nothing, you have no claim on anything, you own anything, you cannot even ask for transparency. Basically, it's nothing. And you sign that and you go for it and you invest there. So we cannot stop you from doing that, but we can make sure that you're going to read that and you know who is the legally responsible for that. So educate people how to use that. Make sure that there is harmonized environment in EU. So taking best practices out of, so we have like Malta is doing something more mature now, Gibraltar the same. We have Estonia, we have Luxembourg, we have, of course, Switzerland. We consider we work very close together, but still it's not 100% certain and clear. And we have France, they're taking like 1,000-2,000 cases of ICOs and they try to categorize them. So we're working very close. We have workshops of standards and legal definitions. So as a lawyer, you know, we need new definitions there. And we cannot fit everything like the shared economy. You cannot put Airbnb and Uber to the old boxes. So we're open to that. We accept ideas because if you leave the securities law, maybe you fell into a more difficult law to live with. And I have to say also that there is like 350 million of euros investments for health applications, identity, agriculture, energy, anything that you might think, or supporting SMEs or like mentoring. So have a marketplace, basically disrupt the disruptors, remove the platforms and give some direct access to people and services without huge fees. Do that on blockchain, give people control of their data because in the blockchain you can see the timestamp, you can see who watched your data and for how long and why and if they use them and why. So basically for that there is a lot of financing. I have to say also, I don't think we have much time, but there are 5 million euros for 5 projects that they will have a social impact. And I think this is also exciting. And also we didn't talk about GDPR. GDPR is also something we have to solve. But let me just say that when GDPR started, we didn't have blockchain. So one issue is that. So we have to also adapt GDPR to that. But there are solutions to avoid having issues. And of course, if you're completely decentralized, then you don't have a controller of data. So you have to make sure there is consent, at least in the beginning. Because if you put it on the blockchain, it's not easy, yes, to remove. And if you have sensitive data, there are some issues there, or might be in the future if cryptography solution with the quantum computers would be, you know, everything will be open. So at the same time, we invest in supercomputers, we invest in quantum computers, we give a lot of financing and funding, as I mentioned. We're open to that, and we have workshops. We have an alliance on health. 24 member states participate to make sure that we have health data on blockchain. So I would say we're quite advanced because we're giving, you know, real money from citizens' money to test this technology and remove the risk that somebody would take. Because we have issues of scalability, energy consumption, and there are new blockchains coming, new solutions on the existing blockchains coming, like the Lightning, for example. It sounds very smart, and more blockchains that would also solve by default the scalability issues. So we're getting there. It's a revolution. You can have an Uber without the Uber, and this could be exciting. And I think that there is field for creative and super smart people to come with great solutions. And when I say social impact, you can have an automatic way. So, for example, imagine a marketplace where you go there, you put your business model, and you have some mentoring in an automatic way. And when you sell something, something comes back in your pocket, in your wallet. In some countries, you cannot even have access to your bank account. You cannot have a bank account. So this has a great social impact. It can help people be autonomous, you know, be free, control their money and their transactions. So I think there is a revolution there. But you have to have a problem to solve. It's not just the hype. You cannot name blockchain everything.
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that. So, Chris, I'm just going over to you. The report that you delivered suggested that the use of distributed ledger technology could change the relationship between governments and citizens via its decentralised trust mechanism. Can you tell us a little about your findings and some in particular?
Absolutely. I think it ties into a lot of what you've just heard there around the opportunity for emancipation, enablement, the potential to reimagine the social contract between citizen and state because of that decentralized truth within the blockchain, that power can rest truly again with the citizen. And we got quite a long way through the panel without somebody mentioning GDPR, and it had to come out. So I think it's only appropriate to mention the B word at this point, Brexit. It's good to get it out there. Can blockchain, can distributed ledgers come up with a solution which could solve the border question by March the 29th next year? Probably not. But could blockchain potentially come up with an incredibly effective way of reimagining the borders at some stage in the not too distant future? Possibly. And certainly a possibly well worth exploring. And that was really at the heart of my report, to not suggest for one moment that blockchain is the silver bullet, not even necessarily a silver bullet, but that there is enough in there, more than enough in there, to make it worthwhile going down the track and experimenting and look at some of these cases. As Loretta eloquently said towards the top of the session, technology is too important to leave to the technologists. This potentially will impact every element of our lives. So we all have a stake in this. We need a public debate around it. We need people to engage, to get involved. If you imagine the supply chain for provenance of food, for example, if you want to ensure that you don't have horse in the lasagna, there may be a role for blockchain worth looking at. Why, when we go to the airport, do we have this sense of coming out of the house thinking, oh, yeah, it's there, the passport's in the pocket, walk 5 steps, get into a cab, check the pocket again to make sure the passport hasn't suddenly developed elastic legs and jumped out of the pocket, it's still there. Get to the airport, the passport's still there. A book of paper pages with a somewhat suspect leather cover determines whether one can go airside and board a flight. But what does that really tell us about what we should be interested in whether that individual should indeed be going airside and boarding that plane? So all of these potential elements, these potential use cases, the thing that first got me very interested in this space was an experiment that we did with the Department for Work and Pensions, which was a tokenized solution for benefits recipients. And as Eva said, I think the fundamental thing to grasp about all of this is none of this can ever be or should ever be technology in search of solutions and trying to attach to something. It should always be about what's the problem we're trying to solve here, and massively intractable problems that have dogged our society. So this thing with DWP, benefit recipients, tokenized method for benefits payments, not only was it fabulously secure and effective, but what was so pleasing was that within just a few days of giving the smartphones to the benefit recipients, they were already coming up with suggestions of how to improve this, how to make it better. So you'd taken people who up until that point largely had been treated by the state as passive benefit recipients, and suddenly you're making them active participants in this experiment. That is that sense of emancipation. That's that sense of enablement, empowerment, and potentially reimagining the whole social contract between citizen and state.
Can I say that I'm really sorry that UK decides to exit? So Chris, and open-minded politicians should not have any barriers in any case. And it's not very easy to have this kind of approach. Usually you have a lot of resistance when you design these legislation. And I totally agree that it's also about the community. So if you have a token that gives you an access to something, to a service or a community, it actually makes sense. If you just use it to take money, then this is just like a crowdfunding issue. But this is completely different. And one thing about the identity, I met a guy recently at a panel that had implanted a chip in his hand, and he was so happy about it. So like, I'm totally free. I have like my identity. I have like all my credit cards are here, so I don't need to carry anything. And he felt free. Ooh. So,
I'm a bit old for that.
Okay. So basically 3,000 people in Sweden, they have now chips in their hands. So I think it's essential to move fast with this technology because people have to have the choice to have it or not, but then we have to make sure they're completely protected with that. And then, yes, I agree, we have to rethink citizenship and identity because it goes beyond borders now. You could live here and work somewhere else. You've worked with the OECD, with Economic Forum.
I don't live anywhere. I'm decentralised, so I'm the living proof that
you are
it works.
decentralised yourself.
So it depends, it actually, at the end of the day, it depends how much trust you have into your government, right? In which country you live. There are plenty of countries where you would never, ever put any kind of chip in your hand, right?
And basically,
yes, I totally agree with your point. And this is why I'm in this scheme, right? I think it's so great. It's basically Bitcoin and blockchain. It's about, shifting the balance of power between state and people, right? And maybe here in Western societies, you don't feel it that way, right? But I grew up in Ukraine. We went through hyperinflation. And we lost everything, right? And we couldn't protect ourselves anyhow, right? But today it's possible. This decentralized money, this is just the first step. But access to finance, to best breed of finance for everybody through this decentralized money.
And also land registry, now that you mentioned that.
Exactly.
A lot of countries at the borders, they like to use blockchain to have a land registry there so that nobody can alter what they actually own, their property. Because I think we have a very mature audience understanding this technology, but if you have each contract copied at anybody's computer, everybody's computer of the community of the blockchain, then you feel super safe that nobody can, like no government can alter what you've done. And you know that this is the case in some countries.
Especially in emerging markets, because if you don't have right over your land, the governments come in, they can seize it. So if you can give certainty over a land title, you can actually have a liquid asset class. And I think that's the interesting thing about blockchain and the tokenisation of everything. Yeah. As a closing note, I was going to ask questions, but I think we're running out of time. I believe that everything can be tokenised. I think in 10 years the world's going to be very, very different. I think people won't ever be talking about blockchain like the internet. There'll be, there's 19 protocol levels that were built on top of the first TCP. I think that's where blockchain will go. And I think, for me personally, it's the security level of data movement that blockchain has given. Just as a quick note, 1 minute for everyone, where do you think blockchain will be in 10 years? Chris?
I give my time to Barbados and Bermuda. We have common friends, so I just I appreciate the work you've been doing there.
I think that the world is going to change. I believe how we do things in this world will totally change. Our kids will be the people that make our world a better place, and we have to create a healthy environment for them to do so. And whilst this is not a commercial for Bermuda, I think that we have seen that we can punch above our weight, and that we have to take a part in changing the world. And I believe that we are able, as the rest of the world can do so through blockchain technologies. I've seen what they're doing in the developing world, specifically in Africa, what they're doing with health, with research, what they're doing in medtech and regtech. And I think this is an opportunity where we will see the world evolve very quickly in this space. I think it is our responsibility to make sure that it is regulated. Regulators have to be fleet of foot, so if there are opportunities for us to change and morph, we have to be available to do so. This is our opportunity. This is the fourth industrial revolution, and this is our opportunity to tell the rest of the world and to show our grandkids that indeed we were custodians of our future by evolving with blockchain technology.
Yes. Maybe to add to this, I think like my biggest hope, and this is what I appreciate about this panel, that guys like you, guys that run regulatory and governmental organization, that through being engaged in this conversation, you're shaping the way forward, right? And our key problem today is that, as technology moved forward, regulation did not catch the space as a step, right? So think about it, guys. Like 30 years ago, internet came around, and it gave information to all, from few to all. And this is what's happening with the blockchain. Blockchain is basically internet of value, and it gives access to value from few to all through democratized, decentralized money, and so on and so on. So now, as we are talking about ICOs, right, and this global crowdfunding, right, what kind of changes we need to see happening on regulatory space, and not talking about singular countries, Switzerland or Bermuda. I mean, who cares what's happening in Bermuda or Switzerland? These small countries. What is much more important is that guys like you, UK, European Union, US, large countries, that you keep pace with our conversation, right? And that you guys also evolve your regulatory standard, and that we will find some kind of standard universal approach that enables listing or offering of securities on a global scale, right? Not just in Bermuda or in Switzerland,
I
right?
agree, but because I'm a bit worried that big governments, they like to control everything. I still like that Bermuda is having this open-minded approach, and hopefully, because as I said, there are no borders there, having these examples are super important to know that we have to follow also their examples.
Yeah, well, I think we're out of time. This was a fabulous panel. Thank you, everybody, for joining. It was really interesting views.